Welcome everyone to this news episode of our vlog series. My name is Claudia Marangon and I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Law and Economics at ETH Zurich. Existing research has shown that early child development is crucial for the formation of human capital, as this period is critical for cognitive, social and emotional growth. This raises a vital question for policymakers, namely, what is the role of public policy in this? Given parents' importance during the early years of a child, it becomes natural to focus on policies that affect parental behavior during this period, such as parental leave. However, while there is some research on maternity leave, on the effect of maternity leave on early child development, the research on paternity leave is scarce. Referring to the research on maternity leave, this research has provided evidence of a positive effect of the introduction of maternity leave on child development and of a more limited impact of its extension. Taken together, this mixed evidence on maternity leave and the lack of evidence on paternity leave call for a further investigation into this topic. So, what is the effect of paternity leave on early child development? I'm very happy to have here with me today Libertad González, professors at Universitat Pompeu Fabra and the Barcelona School of Economics. Professor González's research focuses on topics in public, labor and health economics. And today she will present us with her paper on paternity leave and child development. Welcome, Libertad.
Thank you for having me.
So, before we dive into this discussion of your paper, why don't you give us a brief summary of about your paper and the background of your research?
Of course. So what we do in this paper is we try to think about how to understand the effects of fathers' time, the time they spend with their young children, how this affects child development in the very early years. In order to think about this question, we take advantage of the fact that Spain has expanded paternity leave quite a lot in the past few years, and as of today, since 2021, paternity leave is as long as maternity leave, meaning that fathers are entitled to 4 months of time off from work after the birth of a child. This is fully compensated in terms of their salary, and they're supposed to spend this time with the children. So we think that these policies increase the time that fathers spend with children in the first year after birth. So what we do is we conduct a large survey of 5,000 households with very young children in Spain, and this survey is designed to capture measures of child development at different ages. And so we can compare families that were eligible for shorter versus longer paternity leave periods to try to detect any possible impacts on child development. And what we find is that while on average we find essentially no impact, so the average child is unaffected by the longer paternity leave spells, children who are at the margin of having some developmental problems, these children are actually, so a higher fraction of these children present some developmental delays when they have been exposed to longer paternity leave. So then we try to understand what are the changes in childcare modes and childcare practices that might lead to these effects, and we conclude that it's probably related to the fact that longer paternity leave makes children start formal childcare a bit later, and for children who are at the margin of having some developmental delays, early childcare seems to be more conducive to good developmental progress compared with staying longer at home with the parents or with the father.
Okay. Thanks so much. This is super interesting. Can you tell us a bit more why you decided to focus on child development?
Yes, of course. So, Spain is now the first, or was the first country in the world that equalized maternity and paternity leave. And these were policies that were very visible in Spain. And actually the main target of these policies was to promote gender equality, both in the labor market and in the home. So there was a lot of attention paid to that. But I'm interested myself in how public policy can promote child development in the short term, but also human capital in the long term. So it seemed to us natural to think about, how these policies may affect the parents, but also, more broadly, the household and in particular the children, which, after all, are very directly affected by the time that the parents are entitled to stay home after birth.
Okay, thanks. Now I want to take a step back before you found your results. So you say that there is the evidence on paternity leave is still scarce. However, there is some work on the effects of maternity leave on child development, and the mechanisms that this paper propose are that maternity leave, like introducing maternity leave, decreases the mother's stress during pregnancy and also increases the time that they can spend with the child, thus leading to higher child's welfare. So from a theoretical perspective, do you think that some similar mechanism would be at play also with paternity leave, or what are the other channels that you would have expected ex ante?
Yes, thank you. So exactly. So what we know about maternity leave is that people have found with evidence from different countries that short paid leave entitlements for mothers are associated causally with better long-term outcomes for the children in terms of human capital, school outcomes, and so on. However, extensions in maternity leave beyond, say, 3-4 months, people haven't found additional effects. So there's something about this initial period, the mother being able to stay home, that seems to have impacts on the children. Now, for paternity leave, we know much less. It's a more recent policy, and it's unclear, right? Because if it's only the very initial months that matter. In Spain, maternity leave was already present. It was already 4 months long, fully compensated, so perhaps the effects would be zero. On the other hand, our initial hypothesis was that perhaps having a second adult present in the household could increase the quality of the time investments that the child would receive in the first few months or during the first year, and this could have had positive effects. On the other hand, it's very important to think about not only parental investments, but also the counterfactual mode of care. So if paternity leave is shorter and then it gets extended, what changes? So what is the father substituting? And in our particular application, what father's time is substituting is some time alone with the mother, because now both parents are spending time together with the child in the initial weeks, but also later on, after a few months, the father is substituting early formal childcare. So it's, the mechanisms that we have to think about is, what is the quality from the point of view of the child of some months of maternal time alone and then formal childcare versus the parents together, then sometime with the mom, and then sometime with the dad, and later childcare. So it's not so obvious once you think about it that way in terms of the combination of different modes of childcare, what the effects would be. And of course, it depends on the quality of these different alternatives, the quality of formal childcare, the quality of paternal interactions with the child, and so on.
Yes, thanks so much. I want to pause a bit on this lower quality childcare that you propose as mechanism in your paper. So in terms of channels, this is one channel that you see that might explain your negative effect that you find. If I remember correctly, there is also some other results that are about the parents' happiness and well-being when this paternity leave is extended. Could you tell us a bit more about that and how that might affect child development?
Yes, so of course, as I said earlier, we're interested in the overall effects of paternity leave policies on the household. So we look at a range of outcomes, including parents' labor market outcomes, and we find no effects of paternity leave extensions on parents' labor supply or employment after the leave period. We also find no effects on household income. There's full replacement during leave and no effects on labor supply afterwards. We find no effects on parental separation. But we do find effects, as you say, on sort of self-reported emotional well-being. And in particular, we find strong effects, positive effects on mothers' self-reported well-being. So moms are happier when paternity leave is longer. Dads might be a little bit less happy. So, in order to kind of make policy recommendations, we think it's important to not focus on a single outcome, but to look at, the overall picture and to think about also, what could be done to improve the quality of these different forms of childcare. So formal childcare in Spain seems to be of good quality. Perhaps we can also work on improving the quality of paternal care.
Okay. Thanks so much, Libertad, for sharing your research with us. Before we conclude, I want to ask one last question, which is might be a bit tricky about policy implications, of course. And I want to do this referring back to your other research on paternity leave. And in particular, in your previous research, you find that introducing paternity leave reduces gender norms and gender stereotypical behavioral in children. And it can also bring to a more equal division of times and roles within the households. So if a policymaker wanted to implement paternity leave or extend paternity leave, what would be your advice to this policymaker?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this question. So, of course, we have to think that these policies are being introduced in countries like Spain, where gender norms are relatively traditional and where men historically have had little involvement with childcare. So the starting point is strong gender stereotypical attitudes regarding childcare and men not having, I don't want to say no training, so no training in childcare, but also no role models, essentially. So the short-term effects of these policies might be very different from the longer-term effects. But so we do find, as you mentioned, that after the introduction or extension of paternity leave in Spain, men become more involved with childcare, but also with other forms of other household chores, way beyond the end of the weeks of leave. So fathers, when they are allowed to spend this time at home shortly after having a baby, then they become more involved persistently. And then in a different paper, what we do is we actually survey children later on at the age of 12. And we compare children who have been exposed to shorter versus longer paternity leave when they were born. Of course, they don't remember this, but they report at the age of 12 that their dads are more involved still with household chores and even with childcare or spending time with their children. So the children have seen this, sort of counter-stereotypical behaviors at home, and what we find is they actually report less gender stereotypical attitudes at age 12, and they also have less gender stereotypical aspirations for themselves when they look into their future, when we ask them about how they see themselves later on. For example, boys are more likely to see themselves working part-time when they have children themselves in the future. So we think that these policies are promising in the long term, but the short-term effects that we've seen in terms of gender equality have been limited. We see some effects in the home, but very little effect in the short term in the labor market. But we're still hopeful.
Thank you again, Libertad, for being here with us today, and we look very much forward to your future contribution.
Thank you for having me.
And to our vlog viewers, we hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, and see you again next time.